I'm introducing this with a new and different slide because, as you can tell, I'm working on my Halloween costume. Tonight, I'm going to party so hard that I look like a zombie tomorrow. And just for now, I have the voice. So I'm really, really sorry. I have water. I've been taking all kinds of exciting drugs. It's going to be an excellent half an hour. So this is me. But what I'm actually talking about today is two things that people kind of love to hate. And I'm pleased to see that so many people are here. Because if you enter a talk like this, you're always kind of worried you're going to be alone in the room. And what I'd like to talk about is what things can we do, really, to kill two birds with one stone? Now, I'm interested in this because the company I work for, Bradex, we're a software development company. We develop software, and we're also really, really into quality assurance. So much so, in fact, that we have test tools. One of them is an open source project here at the Eclipse Foundation, and they're both free, so there's the plug. But working on those tools and working with those tools makes us think about, is this usable? Is this testable? And sometimes it turns out that those two things correlate quite a lot. So I'm not going to talk about things that just have to do with usability. Design and layout is an incredibly important thing, and I am not the person to talk about that. Testability, things that just help that. We all know about naming things, yeah? I'm not going to talk about that either. I'm going to really talk about things, what practical examples can we have of improving usability and testability that will make things just that bit better. And this talk was originally motivated by me looking through style guides. Has anyone ever read the Eclipse style guide? Was it awesome? I'm not dissing the Eclipse style guide, but I remember reading through it thinking, I really want some concrete examples of how I should do things or why I should or shouldn't. And I found a lot of very, very detailed information about sizes of fonts and icons and things, which is probably very important, but it wasn't really what I was looking for. So I hope that I can share some things with you today. Right, before I get going any further, stop. Who has ever seen Jubular? I know that some of you were in the tutorial yesterday. Who of you thinks, wow, that is the most usably designed tool ever? That's okay, because I'm not putting my hand up either. I know our projects, we have these problems too. I'm not standing here saying, we know everything and we're so great. What I'm saying is that we've figured some things out and we try and implement these as well. It doesn't always work because we're human, right? We're dealing with legacy things. We're dealing with things that exist for ages. We're dealing with people who forget. Maybe we're in agile processes where getting it working is more important than it being pretty right now. And there are lots of reasons. So the idea isn't to make everyone go out feeling like crap, except for me with my voice, but just to give us some pointers, things that we can maybe think about. So, bit of theory. Two big guys who did a lot of work on usability, Nielsen and Jacobson. I hope I've got those names right. These are Nielsen's, some of his usability things, not all of them, like I say, leaving some out. And these things are stuff that I've found from various testing gurus, testing websites and things in terms of testability. Now, you can already see, just based on the top two, that there's already going to be some correlations there, and I'd like to look at some examples. So, brief tangent. I'm a linguist. I don't come from a software development background. I come from a conversation analysis background. There's a reason I'm telling you this. The reason is, when we do conversation analysis, we look at how participants in a conversation know that they can talk, that they can ask questions, and how they know that their stuff is being received and understood by their other participants. And we talk about orienting to cues in the participant conversation. I can talk about this for hours, I'm not going to. And the same kind of thing is what we're talking about when we're talking about system status. What can I orient to? How do I know that it's done what it's supposed to do, or that it is doing what it's supposed to do? How can I as a user, or how can I as a tester, or as a test tool, see what's going on? So the idea from the usability perspective is we keep users informed, they get feedback, and they get it in reasonable time. In terms of testability, I can look at things either with my eyes or with a tool's eyes to see what's going on, to understand what's going on. I can observe the results, and I can do checks in an automated fashion so that I know, yes, that was okay. So we've already got visibility of system status helps us with observability and automatability. Let's have a look at some examples. My favorite example is progress, right? I see this and I go, oh God, I broke it. Oh dear. Should I restart? You see not responding, you think that something has gone horribly wrong. And if it lasts for more than about 2 seconds, you really do start to worry. So in terms of usability, I would give that 2 minuses. Not a good idea, don't do this. And in terms of testability, I mean, obviously my experience and a lot of the things I'm talking about come from automating, but even as a tester, a manual tester, you're probably going to be looking at doing some kind of static wait. Okay, most of the time it's done in 20 seconds, so I'll wait for 20 seconds. Awesome, that's an excellent test. It's not. Let's not do that. This is a bit better. I can imagine that when the egg timer came out, it was the usability best thing ever since sliced bread, right? But these days we have slightly more exciting things. And if I see this, or I have a Mac now, which I don't really love, but if you see the beach ball of death, you still start to think, is it broken? And if you're not thinking, is it broken, you think, is it ever going to be finished? And the same thing is in terms of testability. Maybe it's a bit better. Maybe you can write something nice that will say, wait for the cursor to come back. If you can hope that the cursor is going to be the right symbol that everything is okay, right? Still not very good. Are you following the voice so far? Is it driving you nuts? It's driving me nuts. It's pure torture for me not to be able to speak. Okay, this kind of thing is actually quite nice, right? You've got a progress bar, you know that the GUI hasn't frozen, but it's one of those, this is an example from us, it's one of those that just kind of goes back and forth, right? So it's kind of half progressy. It's not broken, but you don't know whether you can go on holiday, get a coffee, or check your emails, or just kind of blink until it's done. There's no feedback on that. In terms of a tester perspective, or an automated test perspective, that's fine. This is as good as you need, right? You've got a dialogue, it appears, it disappears. You can do nice kind of dynamic waits for things like that. That's all kind of good. Even better for your users, right, is if you've got progress that shows real progress. In terms of testability, a tool doesn't really care whether you've got real progress showing. If you're doing things like performance analysis, then you could do some exciting, how far along is it at which time, but if you're just waiting to synchronize, that's really not much of a difference. Even better, something we have in Eclipse, right, is that if you can run it in the background, do. How about not blocking the GUI so that your users don't have to wait for stuff that they don't have to wait for? Although a funny thing, when I was taking this screenshot, I noticed that sometimes, even in Eclipse, the progress dialogues kind of stop here and then disappear. So we're not the only ones that are a bit freaky on progress. Okay, looking for clues. One of my favorite examples and one of my favorite questions when people are talking to me about testing is, you know, when I've added a record to the database, how can I go and do a database check to find out if it's there? And I always answer in 2 ways. I say, yep, you can. And I say, is that what your users are going to have to do? Because if your users are going to have to go and start, I don't know, Toad or whatever to find out if something's in the database, maybe that's a problem. Or maybe you should be thinking about how you're telling your users, you know, that customer you just created, if you search for him, you'll find him, or you'll see like a nice little thing saying, correctly, successfully created. And this is an excellent example from Eclipse, right? I know that something isn't saved when I've got my nice little dirty star, and the save button is active. I know that something is saved when both of those things have changed. Having multiple queues is brilliant. I've never seen it happen, but if I ever did see that the save button was deactivated, disabled, and that star was still there, you'd know something was wrong, right? You'd be like, ooh, this is odd. Having multiple queues to tell you things is a very, very good idea. And so you can have a test that synchronizes to one of those things and checks the other thing. It's nice for your users, it's nice for your test. Okay, now users are kind of crazy. They're going to click all over the place. They're going to do things, and they're going to get themselves into areas that they maybe didn't want to go into. And the idea with user control and freedom is that they need emergency exits. They need ways of getting out without deleting everything, without doing that thing that they didn't want to do. And that comes right down to controllability. in testability, if I control the state of the component or the state of the application, then I have a better chance of testing that. This is a real example, I kid you not, of a dialogue that I saw. I won't say where I saw it. I'm not that mean. I opened it up, I started typing, and I wanted to confirm it. Okay. So I clicked X, thinking that's cancel, right? X is always cancel. No, X was confirm. So that, I couldn't have thought this example up if I'd have tried. I saw it, and I died a little inside. And in terms of testability, again, it depends on what kind of frameworks you're using. You may or may not have access to things like the X, and even if you do, how are you going to write that save or cancel use case? Hit escape, hit X, that's save and cancel, or cancel and save, and you can bet your bottom dollar that if that's how it looks, no one's actually thought about those being the use cases, and at some point they're just going to change, or one of them's going to be something different, and you're going to wonder what went wrong. I'll admit to not being a developer, but I've been told it's not that difficult to add buttons to things. I've been told, like I say, it would take me about 4 years, but I'm sure that you guys are way more capable of that. So adding buttons makes a clear choice. You shouldn't have a dialogue that you confirm or discard without buttons. Clear choice, clear effects, and I've been told by one of our designers back at home that you get extra brownie points if instead of OK and cancel, you use verbs like accept and discard, because that's a bonus. The test tool doesn't care about that, or the tester maybe doesn't care about that, but it's nicer for your users. And in terms of testability, bonus points. You've got buttons, you can orient to them. You can probably even do nice little tests like, if I enter this, then it should be disabled. If I enter this, then it should be enabled. You can do things like that as well. And your tests will be more readable because you read through your tests and you say, click OK, instead of hit escape because we think that might mean save. It's important, and this is one of the easiest examples, right? From 2 minuses to 2 pluses. If you take nothing else away, take buttons. Buttons are important. We like them. Okay. Changing your mind, right? This is also one of my favorite examples. I actually took this from Eclipse, but we have exactly the same thing. There's a cancel button there, and it's disabled. Even better is when you've got the cancel button, and you click it, and it just disables, right? It's awesome, because you're kind of telling your user there might be a possibility of canceling this, but you're not going to tell them what it is. And the worst thing is your user won't go, OK, then, well, I won't cancel it. They're going to go to the task manager. They're going to kill it. And you have no idea what that's going to do to your data. So in terms of testability, you know your user's going to manage to find a way to cancel it, right? Turn the computer off. OK, you try canceling now. And you want to be able to test what your users are going to do. So make it available to them to do that, and then you can test that way of doing it. Now, I know, since I gave this talk for the first time, one of my bugbears in all of our meetings has been like, are we going to be able to cancel this? And we talk about it a bit, and we say, no. We're not going to be able to, because it would be undefined. It would take a great deal of effort to do something. At least we're talking about it now, right? If you can't make it cancelable, then confirm it before you say, you're not going to be able to undo this. You're not going to be able to cancel it. Take a deep breath and think about whether you really want to do this. Because there's nothing worse than watching that progress bar deleting everything that you've just done, knowing that there's no way out. Add a cancel button if you can. Users in control, you can test it better. Everybody's happy. Speaking of confirmation, this is my face when I delete something accidentally and it does not ask me, are you sure? Do you know, anyone else ever noticed how close S and D to each other are on the keyboard? You know, you want to save, you end up deleting. Happens to me, right? Okay. Asking users if they're sure is a good idea. Now, it doesn't always help. I have an anecdote about somebody who wrote into our support at one point saying, I tried to open a project and it deleted it instead. I mean, if that's a bug, that's terrifying, right? And it turns out that because the open and open and delete were quite close to each other, he'd hit the wrong one and confirmed that he wanted to delete it. So it can happen to you anyway. What we did was we moved open and delete further away from each other in the menu. It's little things sometimes. But if you do get asked, you know you have an explicit way of checking this is what I'm doing, read the thing, okay? And you can cancel it if you don't want to. I like the preview function in Eclipse as well. I think that's kind of cool. And in terms of testability, you might just then end up with one module. Yeah, if we're talking about automating tests, anyone who was Jubilar yesterday, you do it once and you do it only once, right? So you've got one module that will say delete, wait for the dialog, say OK, check that it's deleted. You don't need to be having different models and different modules. Models in your head, modules in your tests. And this all comes down to consistency and standards, right? If something's understandable, if it's consistent, it's going to be more automatable, and it's more friendly if you're doing exploratory testing. If the same thing means the same thing everywhere, if I can find and figure out where I am based on, oh wait, I know I did this over here, and I know I can do this here. So I guess that means I can do this as well, because I could do that over there. Humans only think in models. We develop models, we adapt our models, and if we have to have different models for different things, it gets confusing, and we're almost always going to get them confused. And the same thing goes for your tests. If you have to have a different module for different things, when do you use one, when do you use the other? Let's have a look. So this was an example. This isn't from anything in Eclipse. From Adobe. You've got searching on the toolbar with binoculars, and you've got an advanced search in the menu that's got some kind of, I'm trying to figure out now if that question mark was there or if there isn't one. Either way, it's different, right? So I know that's only an icon, and it's probably the case that the extended search has different parameters, but if those two icons are different, then I wonder, does it use the same algorithm? Was it done by even the same team? If one of them changes, will the other one get changed as well? What else is different? This doesn't fit together, and that, as a user of a software, that makes me worried. And as a tester of a software, that makes me think, this is going to be the kind of place where a bug comes in, because we think of one of them and we don't think of the other. So it's about more than just testing, it's about thinking about the whole quality process. And this comes back, it's the same example as before. It's the idea of knowing where I am. If I don't know when a confirmation dialog comes, when I'm deleting, when I'm closing an editor without saving, anything else that is going to change something. If I don't know when it comes, then I don't feel safe as a user, right? I don't know whether I can do this. I don't feel like I can work in my flow and make mistakes. Same as a test. If I have to have two modules, I need to know when I'm using them. There's a high likelihood that it's going to change from day to day, week to week, which things get used here, which things get used there. A new feature gets developed. It's done with one, then it's done with the other. There are ways, of course, of making clever tests that will deal with both, but that's kind of avoiding the problem in this sense, because you think, again, where's the gap? Why are we doing it one way here, and why are we doing it in a different way over there? Now, I know that there are some people, I had a big talk about this after EclipseCon in America with someone who said, I hate those confirmed dialogues. I know what I'm doing. So if you want to do that, have a preference for it, but don't have it being different here and there and here and there. Okay, so if you have it, then you know exactly where you are when you're a user and when you're a tester. Flexibility. Now, in terms of user perspective, power users want accelerators. Power users want to be able to do things as quickly as they can. Newbies need to be guided a bit more. They need to see things. They need to be more led. And there are people who have impairments, visual impairments, hearing impairments, tactile impairments, all kinds of things that can't access a software in the same way as maybe everyone else. And so they're forced in their choices of how they deal with it. And in terms of testability, being able to access all functions is a hugely important thing. Everyone knows, right, that if you can't access something out of the box, you think, oh, okay, so I'm going to have to do some work for this. It's nicer if you don't have to do the work. This is another real example. I was at a customer's as a test consultant. I was doing some work with them on their application, and everything else in this application was a bog standard, out-of-the-box, standard component Eclipse RCP application. I was like, yes. And then they had this welcome screen. It wasn't the Eclipse welcome screen. It was their own rendered in 2D something, we've made it pretty, welcome screen. It looked pretty, I won't say anything against it. But the only thing that you could do to deal with this welcome screen was click on one of those things. You couldn't tab through them, there weren't any keyboard shortcuts, there was no other way of doing it. So just in terms of a user perspective, I'm a keyboard user. If I'm faced with something like this, I want to hit something on the keyboard. I don't want to move my hands to go to the mouse. And in terms of testing, specifically because they were custom controls, the fact that that was the only option meant that we had to say, okay, we're going to have to do something about that. If there had been something as simple as keyboard shortcuts or mnemonics or you can tab through, then that would have made that problem not a problem. And it would have made, in terms of usability, it would have added a plus, right? The more you add, the better it is for your user. And I know that this, again, me, not developer, but I've been told that there are things like commands and handlers in Eclipse that let you do things like menus and context menus and shortcuts and toolbar items, so that you can do a lot of things with not a great deal of effort. And the more that you add, the happier your users are. They feel at home, they can work how they want to. Those who have to work in a specific way can work in that way more likely. And you as a tester are probably happier too, and your tests are. And actually, this is something that goes above and beyond this talk in itself, because I don't know if you've seen kids these days. Every time they go up to a computer screen, they want to touch it, right? Mouse and keyboard is so out. And we can't just think about just having a click. It has to be a click and a tap now. We have to be able to swipe it. We have to deal with the fact that things that we're writing now, they're possibly going to be in one way or another being dealt with fingers and maybe, I don't know, like Jonas does with his Kinect. There's going to be lots of different ways of interacting with an application. So everything you add is a bonus for your users. Having one of them that your test tool can do is a bonus for your test tool. And the funny thing is that alongside this whole gesture explosion, users are becoming less tolerant of bad usability because of exposure to mobile devices. That's not a quote from anyone, that's how I feel. I feel that we as people are getting so much, I install it, I don't like it, I throw it away. I don't have to work with things I don't want to anymore. If it doesn't convince me, it's gone. Usability is becoming one of our huge criteria, is so much more important. And the same thing goes for quality. If I don't like it, throwing it away. So we're becoming a lot less tolerant of things we don't like, and we have to start integrating that into how we think about developing software, even if it is on the desktop right now. And the same thing is for navigation through tables, trees, dialogues. I hate it when I have to set the focus myself. I hate it when I can't navigate through this tree by using the keyboard. Think about how people are going to work with things, or take your mouse away for a day. That'll be fun. Okay. I hate having to remember things. If I don't write it down, then that's it. And as it turns out, apparently users don't like that either. So if you've seen like wizard pages that only have one screen on it and then you hit next, and then you forget what you entered, or there's a problem with that later, not a good idea, not a good problem. If you find yourself having to enter the same data again and again, or remember what you entered so that you have to do this now, that's bad in terms of a user perspective. The great thing is, in terms of testability, you will notice this really quickly. If you're automating a test and you're like, why do I need to do so much to just log in? That's when you start to really think about, how many steps do I need to do? What do I need? What are the explicit actions that I really need to do? And why should I be putting my users through that? Is there nothing I can do to make that easier for them? Okay. And the last point is happily named recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. That's quite a lot, I think, to say. But there's a nice step ladder that you can think about in terms of stages. Okay, my favorite thing, and I say favorite and I don't mean it, is when you have a website, you fill in the form, you put your password in, you've got like your, okay, I use the same password for a lot of things. Shh, don't tell anyone. You put your favorite password in, you enter all of your details, you click OK, and it says, that password was wrong, and it throws everything away. Awesome. I love that, right? No. So it's nicer if we know where the problem is, if possibly we're even stopped from making a mistake in the first place. I'll get to that in a second. It's less frustrating. And in terms of testability, if you're testing the logic of that dialogue, if you're testing that you can only enter passwords this much, it's a lot easier to write a loop that enters one with 3 and can check, nope. Enters one with 4, check, nope. Instead of filling the whole thing out again and again. It's bad for your users. I mean, the robot doesn't really care at the end of the day, but the people writing the tests probably do, and the people doing the manual tests certainly do. So here's some stepping stones, and you can feel free to add your own. Showing nothing, I think we can agree, is a really, really bad idea. Silently failing or silently doing things, let's not even talk about that anymore. Showing an error dialogue is at least, okay, you can't do that. But I really, maybe this is a personal preference, but I really hate a dialogue that comes and says that you can't do that after I've already done it. I'd prefer to be told sooner. Not allowing confirmation with some kind of label at the top. At least I don't get a dialogue, but maybe it's going to take longer. Inline corrections are one of my favorite things in the world. And one of my favorite things in the world in Eclipse applications is the control decoration, which I'm pleased that I remember the name for because I usually call them info bubbles. And I call them that, and at some point in our code, that made it in, so I remember the name. And that is brilliant. You enter something, it's not right, it's not ideal, little thing comes up, hover over tooltip. Oh, okay, that's good. It's apparently, again, not that difficult to implement, and it's just amazing in terms of usability. And it's kind of good from testability as well. Inline suggestions, this was something that I added after talking to one of our girls who's been working on this as well. I'd never seen anything like this before, that if you have an error, like I say, I don't like the dialogue so much, but the idea behind it is it says, you can't do that because you've got 2 backslashes. Here, I've put a red ring around them in the dialogue. Oh, by the way, if you try and enter any of these other special symbols, that's not going to work either. And they're already highlighted so that when you click on OK, or when you've read it, you just have to hit delete. I mean, that is pretty awesome stuff. I will happily agree when talking about user stories that we don't think about this often enough, and we probably don't put enough effort into it, but starting to think about it is always the first step. Errors completely impossible, that would be cool, right? Answers on a postcard later on. But if we can stop the user from being frustrated by mistakes he's made, if we can teach him or her that for the next time backslashes are a bad idea, then we're helping. Okay, so I've got some smells. Who ever writes documentation? Okay, I write documentation. Who gets, just as a tangent question, who gets really frustrated because no one ever reads documentation? Okay, yeah, it's just not just me. We can all go and get a drink later. If you don't write docs, write some. Because if you write the docs and you feel yourself die a little inside about what you're doing to those people, then that's a bad smell. If you're thinking already when you're talking about a feature or a story, I really hope I'm not the one who has to describe this to someone. Wave a flag, because I'm the one that gets to describe it to people. If you've got the support questions coming in about the same thing again and again, maybe the users aren't stupid. Maybe there's something that you could improve. Automate a test. And I'm not just saying that because I think that you should do it with what we have. But automate a test. Automate one and see how you feel about how many explicit things you might have to do for that. Because if it's a lot, then you might want to think about making that easy for your users. If you do something and the GUI is like, I am not telling you anything, that's a bad sign. If you're automating and a static weight is your best friend, that's probably bad too. And if you have either different models in your head or modules in your tests for doing actually what is the same thing on an abstract level, if you have to document things in a different way because here we do it differently, that's a bad smell too. If I could choose 3 things to just kind of remember, apart from buttons, oh, that's a button, there we go. I'd say every action should have a reaction. That's physics, right? I wouldn't say it has to be opposite and equal, but an action should have a reaction. I do something, I see something, I can find something based on what I've done. Give the users a choice. People like having choice, it makes it nicer to work with software. And offer people a way out wherever you can. And if you can't, try and tell them that you're not going to offer them a way out. those are my top three. And this is not what I'm going to look like tomorrow morning, I hope. But I thought he was kind of cute. So I think we have a couple of minutes for any questions. Go on, Benny.
So you said you actually love using full decorations. And
I do.
actually had a discussion last week where we're implementing some dialogues and stuff. And so we were reading up again the Eclipse guidelines, who actually should suggest to use the wizard banner thing to suggest errors or like warnings. And like from a usability perspective, they look nice, but they're actually not very useful because you have to use the mouse to hover over them to find out what's wrong.
There is the problem with the tooltip, I'll give you that. What I like about them in comparison to the banners is that if you've done multiple things and you have multiple problems, there's always limited space in the banner. So the tooltip thing is a definite, I was talking about this with one of the girls at work about this. The tooltip is, that's when I have to go to the mouse as well, so maybe there should be another way of doing that, but I like the inlineness of it. But you're right, yeah. Okay, I hope that my voice didn't drive you too crazy. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you could take some things away. I've got some references on there. I said Jacobson, didn't I? It was Schneiderman. Oh well, it was the throat. Evaluate it. I've put an excellent there because, I hope you think it was. If you liked it, tell me you did. If you didn't like it, tell me why, because I like to have improvement suggestions. Thanks very much.